Guys, without further ado, we got the Legacy of WoW Cataclysm video here from Preach.
All will burn beneath the shadow of my wings. Oh, I'm Deathwing. You have waited 2 years to fight me. Oh no, it's his dirty fingernails. Get him!
What? I was not expecting
Fire
that.
rains from above. Raiding is totally destroyed. The LFR is coming and Raggy has legs now. But whoa, whoa, whoa. No one rides the lady.
What? I did
This
not expect this.
is the legacy of the Cataclysm.
Okay. You got me, Preach. You got me.
The biggest, baddest dragon in the world just flapped his wings and destroyed everything. New world, new design, fresh coat of paint. The Barrens is now divided in two. The Thousand Needles is flooded. And, well, that was all very cool if you were re-rolling. But, of course, it was the new juicy zones, new ideas. Blizzard was trying to fight back. Their sub-numbers have been flying through the roof for expansions. And here we are with all this change. Less leveling. Only 5 levels. Great. People don't really like leveling that much. This is wonderful. Nice and fast. I leveled in just one night. New zone ideas. Hi, Xaryu. Very cool. You know what? Screw you. Screw you if you hate Vashj'ir. Vashj'ir, right, is the fastest zone. It's creatively awesome. You get the fastest seahorse in the goddamn world to go across the zone. It was phenomenally good, and I really encourage you, with the upcoming re-release of Cataclysm, try Vashj'ir with fresh.
I didn't like Vashj'ir back then, and I don't plan to play Vashj'ir now. I'm going to level in Hyshal.
Guys, it's so good, and they're never going to make one again because everybody hated it at the time. But one thing that was great to see with the zone design of Cataclysm was the introduction of not only really scary things. We had Egyptian monsters flying out, we had dragons circling this massive tower off in the distance, but also comedy. We had Harrison Jones swinging his way to victory. We had quests like Nomageddon making a giant fat ball of death of gnomes rolling across the plains. Blizzard was on absolute peak form.
No obliteration.
So where did it go wrong? It was too damn hard. Everybody gave up. I'm not joking. People came from Wrath of the Lich King, which was baby mode. It was too easy, and Blizzard had a big issue. Their game just wasn't challenging. It wasn't investing. Their core players that had been around for years were looking to get out. This was the first time that sub numbers started dropping. Not just because it was too hard causing the casuals to leave, but also because the invested players were just done. They were tired. Cataclysm's launch was iffy at best.
Interesting.
You see, Blizzard wanted to correct the mistakes of Wrath of the Lich King. What were those mistakes? Wrath of the Lich King was the most popular period in time for World of Warcraft. It was too damn easy, especially in the...
Do you guys, this is an interesting perspective to hear. Do you guys think Wrath was too easy? Like, honestly, do you think Wrath was too easy? A lot of people are saying yes. Okay, maybe I'm like you guys think heroic Lich King was too easy? Maybe I am a noob. Okay.
These eyes of the developers themselves. Dungeons in Wrath of the Lich King, even heroics, were just being stomped left and right. It was so easy for one tank to just run continuously through the dungeon, tapping everything on the shoulder, having the mobs glued to them, and those mobs being just unable to do damage to them. So everybody just ran through AoEing, and it became a monotonous, almost endgame ARPG experience without the fun of building up those massive characters. What we weren't looking for in World of Warcraft was Path of Exile or Diablo endgame just when you start playing. Well, at least Blizzard wasn't. The dungeons were a big revamp. In Wrath of the Lich King, the heroics had become really easy, and in Cataclysm, they decided to just turn them back up. And the interesting thing is, they didn't even turn them up a lot. They introduced magical, wondrous things like having to interrupt. Mobs that reflect. I'm sure many of you remember, if you played at the time, the wonderful resounding sound.
Oh.
Break yourselves upon my body.
Ah, what a wondrous time to be alive. Now,
Watch
In
out.
a post by Ghostcrawler where he discussed the dungeon difficulty, he clearly said that Blizzard was just unhappy with what the dungeons had become in Wrath and they needed to be a bit harder. They truly believed, as a lot of games devs did, that overcoming some sort of challenge is rewarding. It's a good player experience. And he said in that post, we don't want disorganized, uncommunicative, put together groups having a near 100% chance of success. So surely
Ghostcrawler based Giga Chad. Yes, I love it.
the players, they rose to that challenge. No, obviously not, to quote a friend of mine. It was a shit show, obviously. And they left it. They really hoped that players would adapt. They hoped players would get used to it. And the players unsubscribed and just stopped playing the game because that's what players tend to do if they're not happy. They just stop playing. They don't whine and moan like most forums would suggest. They just disappear. And they did. It took over 2 months for Blizzard to massively nerf the dungeons. They left it for 2 months and they saw for the first time in World of Warcraft history, people were leaving their game. The numbers were no longer rising. The snowball had hit the wall and World of Warcraft was no longer untouchable. All is not lost though, because things like this, challenges, players yearning for more information gives rise. And in that moment, it gave rise to this is what I heard, very handsome, young YouTuber who was sat in a little room with a little microphone.
I know what he's talking about. Bajira started in Kata. Bajira started in Cataclysm. A very handsome, jacked dude started up in Kata. I'm pretty sure he's talking about Bajira.
Doing his absolute best to provide the toppest quality content imaginable.
So we're going to be looking at getting as much poison damage, as much hit to make sure our poisons hit as well, and as much mastery to make our poisons do more damage.
Look, man.
Bro, 2010 YouTube videos hit so different. Like, I was just, I was going to one of my old videos just before we started this, like the Xaryu pet control video. And like, dude, half of my old videos from 10 or 15 years ago, I just start off with like, all right, guys, so I'm going to do a guide. Like, it's just so troll, dude.
I couldn't afford a microphone back then, but at least I had hair, right? It's time we talked about raiding. Raiding was decimated at the start of Cataclysm, and I truly hope and pray those of you going into Cata Classic will have a much better time. So what actually happened? Well, it looks at this point, right, that Cataclysm was massively rushed. Don't know why, can't get an answer out of the devs who were there at the time, but this is the way it came across. How do we know this, though? Well, let me put it this way. If you have a 25-man raid, and it has ads in it, right? We've all seen that before. And those ads have, say, 12 million health. And then you have a 10-man raid, right? Now, using some sort of mathematics, that's less than 25 people. And the ads in that raid also have 12 million HP. Then maybe you goofed somewhere. You goofed up massively. Honestly, the idea of 10 and 25-man raiding is a pie-in-the-sky dream that I kind of do wish happened now. I've changed my opinion on that over the years because it is super, super fun, but it just doesn't practically work. 25 players have access to way more tools, way more resources, and generally have an easier time. 10-man is way more restrictive. It's not even representing all the classes in the game, and it really doesn't help when Blizzard seemingly doesn't care about 10-man at all and just leaves it to rot. Unfortunate for me, I changed to 10-man. I left Method at the end of Wrath of the Lich King and made my own 10-man guild for Cataclysm. Oof. Oof. I got World 13, sure, on Halphus Wormbreaker, 10-man, but it was the worst experience of my life. How bad could it be? Well, we had the example of the ads earlier on, but let's just say Halphus Wormbreaker, a boss that is being pugged by 25 people, is almost unkillable in 10-man. Why? Well, it has a mechanic that stuns the players, and it needs to be interrupted while this stun's going on. Sounds easy. Unless Blizzard forgot that interrupts can miss. And even though you assign people to do it, they can't. And then they don't realize this is a problem for 2.5 months. I'm not joking. 2.5 months, raiding was entirely broken. 10 men could not get past the first couple of bosses, and it got worse even in the 25-man structure. All of the bosses had massive, massive problems. Some of this footage has been deleted, and one of the worst things about making the legacy videos for you guys is that I know certain things happened, and I know this footage exists, and I can't find it for you. Such as Method versus Magmor, where Just Wait and Roger Brown kited all of the ads not only out of Magmor's room, but into Omnitron Defense's room, and were running laps around outside of the raid in order to kill that boss because it was so utterly broken. I can show you this though. Do you recognize this boss? No? I don't blame you, because they're not stood in the boss room. This is Atramedes 25-man, where they literally don't go into the boss room because the boss room is broken and they pulled the boss out and fought it there. This was happening everywhere. Did Blizzard ban them? No. Why? Blizzard knew these bosses were absolutely borked and broken, and they couldn't.
Dude, this is such an interesting perspective of Cataclysm. I had no idea the raids were this broken on launch, but on the Cata re-release, we're getting the later patch when a lot of this stuff has already been fixed, so this wouldn't be an issue. And I mean, players have like the weak ores and stuff nowadays, and like the strats where it probably wouldn't anyway. But like, yeah, wow, that seems miserable. I had no clue. I was like an absolute noob in Cata and PvE, and in PvP I was kind of an absolute. I mean, we were getting there. We were on the rise in Cata, but I had no clue this was happening. Side note: this guy's name is Malachi, which is my son's name, which is a pretty cool name, bro.
Fix it. 2.5 months until all this came in. Let's not mention or skip over the fact that Paragon rose to godhood here. And you guys should be fully aware we are making a History of Paragon video that will be coming out pretty soon. But this is where they shone. Why? They outplayed Blizzard. They flat out outplayed Blizzard. They are historically known for doing this, and they shone brighter than any star right here.
Cool.
We could see on Alakir, famously, where half the raid is not even on the platform to fight the final boss of Throne of the Four Winds. We can also see at Nefarian, notoriously bringing 16 or 17 druids to that raid in order to overcome the way that boss worked. Not to mention a lot of the scams that needed to take place to even kill the killable bosses. 10-man Throne of the Four Winds required a crit-capped mage. It required a specific guardian druid setup, a holy priest. Otherwise, the boss is undoable. Raiding was at the worst it's ever been.
Wow.
In
I
Cataclysm.
had no idea.
And that's coming from me who's seen it all. But then, by the Emperor's gaze, was the world saved. Because Cataclysm did introduce something which you guys feel deep inside of you. Yes, my friends, Cataclysm brought with it the shining light of the sun. It brought with it transmogrification.
Nice, Preach. Looking good, bro. Looking good, dude.
Okay, YouTube. Hold on a second there. Mock's still shit.
Transmog is the biggest deal that ever came to World of Warcraft. Some would say Mythic Plus or something like that. No, Transmog has literally kept this game alive for millions of players. Now, people could look good while playing their characters. The clown suits of old were destroyed, and it really made an end game for people who had no end game. If you were to ask a seasoned player, what is the end game of World of Warcraft? Raiding, Mythic Plus, PvP. And that would be incorrect for the vast majority of people who play World of Warcraft.
Oh.
The real end.
Oh my goodness gracious. Are we smoking peekaboo? What is this? Oh, this is a shuffle up to rank 1? Oh yeah, so when we got rank 1 in the world. Okay, yeah, I remember that. All right, let's keep watching.
Game is transmog for a huge amount of people. For years and years since Cataclysm did this, people have spent countless days of their lives going into old content that they couldn't raid when it was legitimate and just farming the armor, collecting it for their alts, for their new characters, for everything. It is what keeps MMOs going to this day. There is not an MMO that launched in the last 10 years that hasn't had some form of transmog for armor, because people love playing dress up with their characters. They like having different themes. Look at Final Fantasy XIV. You would argue that 90% of that game is transmog.
Okay.
And people dressing up and having various outfits that they can do all kinds of things with. And it is the key that kept Cataclysm above water. I'm serious. When transmog came in late into Cataclysm, it is what stopped the stemming of the subnumbers. It plugged the hole. It kept people even keel because they had all this stuff. Void storage came in so they could save old items. And there is no way that transmog isn't the biggest thing that happened with Cataclysm, despite all the raiding and problems it had. But transmog isn't as cut and
Do you guys think this has real and true? Type 1 in the chat if you think Cataclysm, like the biggest thing Cata brought was transmog. Man, I kind of have to agree. I didn't really think about it that way. It's so massive. I know there's a lot of classic Andes, and we talked about this like 2 hours ago, that are actually dislike Mog, like they hate it because they're like, dude, I can't see if someone has Molten Core gear. I can't see what character progression they have because it's covered up by their Mog. I can't see, like it removes the MMO feel. So I know there's people that hate it. Having said that, I think Preach is right here, man. There are so many players that play just to kind of look cool in the game. Like Asmongold did nothing except farm Mogs through an add-on called, what was the add-on called, chat? Do everything? Do it all? Do everything? Something like that? Where you farm ATT, all the things. Yeah, ATT, all the things. There's people that play to farm absolutely everything in the game that's transmoggable. That's crazy. That was mind-blowing to me years ago. I guess now it's not that crazy. That's just like kind of what people do. And like later stage in an MMO, it kind of makes sense, you know? It's like, yeah, let me just kind of collect everything there is to collect. Be a completionist to some degree. Farm some stuff. I guess it's not that crazy of a concept. It used to be crazy to me when all I did was PvP, you know?
I'm dry in that. In fact, nothing is, and I try and claim that to you guys all the time. Nothing is black and white. Transmog did cause some problems. Nowhere near enough to outweigh the positives.
Right,
but
yeah, true.
No
Fair.
longer was your new shiny armor that you got from the latest raid or the latest PvP tournament worthwhile. People didn't care. They looked best in tier 2 from years and years ago. And now when you were that completionist, when you got your whole set of the new tier from the latest raid, barely anybody recognized it. I'll be honest with you guys.
Yeah, see, so that's a real negative, right? Like I just said, the positives I think definitely outweigh the negatives, like for sure. But that is a real negative what Preach just said. Like back in the day in Classic WoW, when you saw someone walking around in full tier 3, you saw a druid that's glowing green or a mage blue. It's like, whoa, man, sick, Nax gear. That guy knows how to play the game. Like that just like, you see a new, like it was just lost at some point. Like you didn't even use the new stuff because you just had your Mog anyway. And I think that is like a real negative, you know? I really do.
These days, and probably for the last 8 years, I couldn't tell you what the current raid tier armor looks like if it was put in front of me.
Yeah,
everything
I agree.
pre-transmog, yeah, I could tell you exactly where it came from because seeing those people in Orgrimmar or Stormwind or Ironforge was amazing. These were the top tier. These were the upper crust. Post-Cata, I have no idea.
Agreed.
I've transmogged every single time I got a new piece of armor.
Yeah?
Blizzard
Fair
stabilized after such a rough start to the beginning of the expansion, literally almost redesigning every single class. There was a lot wrong at the start, but in the midpoint, and you can even see this in the sub numbers, the additions started to slow things down. People started to stick around. A lot of the big changes, such as tanks,
That's a cool hoodie. I like that design.
no longer having any threat. In fact, when I started doing guides, one of the things I refused to do was do a guide on my main character. And the main reason was I couldn't attack anything in dungeons without pulling aggro. And I was worried it would look newbie to a casual eye. Blizzard then changed this. 4.2, they massively buffed every single tank's threat to like another 200% of their damage done in order to enable people to do dungeons. And on the back of that, they broke the glass. Legendaries were returning, and they were about to unleash one of their big boys. Raggy and his little tiny legs were on their way. The Firelands was a really big deal in Cataclysm. It changed a lot. It gave people focus, purpose. The new daily quest rewarded wonderful things and was surprisingly fun to do in a very enclosed area. No longer were people going all over the map to do their stuff. They had a very simple location to go and they could be in and out in 20 minutes. This is what people wanted for their rep gains at the time. Nice function, great rewards, and a brand new raid to go with it. I want to talk about the Firelands a little bit. It's an interesting experience if you ever progressed it, or perhaps you're looking to progress it in the classic update. Out of the bosses in there, nearly all of them are very, very easy. It was surprising. I was playing in a very, very good guild at the time, known as Darkstorm. Darkstorm had been around since vanilla. We killed all the bosses in the first 4 days. We then went on to the Major Domo. Killed him in the first pull. This is the penultimate boss before Ragnaros. But then we got met with arguably one of the greatest bosses World of Warcraft has ever made in the redone Ragnaros. An absolutely incredible experience, and I am filled with joy every time I think about that, and I'm really hoping a lot of you get to relive that experience of having Ragnaros rise out of the floor and start chasing you. Also, some classic moments from the progress of the guilds like Paragon and Method, such as Sko leaping to his death off the side of the platform to try and save the raid. Didn't work, but 10 out of 10 for effort on that one. One thing it did expose, though, of course, not everything's black and white. Legendaries. The legendaries are a temptation for every single player. They want their legendaries, and this time it was going to be the casters. Dragon Wrath, Tarot-Ghosa's Rest, duplicating your spells and turning you into a dragon. One of the biggest temptations ever. It did come with a caveat though. It was going to follow the same quest system that Valanir had in Ulduar. Here's the problem with this. If you were in a raiding guild at the time, you'll absolutely know what I'm talking about. The nerds. Oh yes. The nerds with their spreadsheets and their calculations had practiced and learned how this worked in Ulduar with the shards. Legendaries turned, at this point, into not some huge reward that you were bestowing on some huge player. Instead, they became predictable, efficient, organized, and strategic, and everyone was getting one. Now, if you've played Legion, or if you've played Mists of Pandaria, you'll kind of be used to the idea that everybody gets a legendary, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't the case then. They were specific. They were for warriors, rogues, or hunters, or they were for the healers. They had a role to play. The casters was a much more broad term. And now with all the fun and life sucked out of it, to the point where you could literally predict the date everybody would get theirs, and then you had to run 2 or 3 raids a week.
I agree with that. I like the idea that legendaries are legendary, and I liked Legion for like gameplay reasons. I thought it was pretty alright for a lot of reasons actually, but the everyone gets a legendary thing was not for me personally. I don't like that. Like everybody gets one. It's like no, well then it's not legendary. Let's rename it then, because it's certainly not legendary if everyone gets one, right? Like kind of like undermines the whole purpose of a legendary item. So I don't know. I agree with that.
In order to have them for the next tier, really sucked a lot of the fun out of it. And the legendaries kept coming, this time for the rogues, Fangs of the Father. But it can't be underestimated. The Firelands is nothing but a huge plus to everything that Cataclysm had done wrong up until this point. It's easy for me to look back at Blizzard doing all these problems in Cataclysm. The raids don't work, but then they gave us transmog and reforging, and then they did this, this, and this. But honestly, it's not all Blizzard's fault. Like, they really tried to do nice things. And as you guys well know, the famous saying is we can't have nice things. And there's no better example than guild perks. Do you remember the guild perks?
I remember.
You know, it was so good. As somebody who didn't abuse it, which might feel strange to you considering my history, but it was something that was a glory. It was so awesome. What were the guild perks? Well, your guild leveled up and it got access to new abilities. It started generating money, for example. You got things like Have Group Will Travel, where your guildies could summon you or an entire raid to wherever they were. It was so good. And then the greedy goblins got a hold of it. The legacy of the Cataclysm is the name of this video, and I'm not finished yet, but there is a phrase that has been developed in this community that is absolutely the legacy of the Cataclysm, and that would be the legacy of the Cesspool Guild. What am I talking about if you've never seen our show before? Well, the Cesspool Guild was a product of Cataclysm. Because these now guild perks could literally generate gold by the guild doing activities. What a lovely idea this was from Blizzard. You guys go raiding, you go PvPing, you do some RBGs, then the guild bank will generate money. And so, people just started swallowing every single player on their servers into their guilds with no intention of guidance, structure, anything at all.
True.
Why?
Yep.
Because those people who were getting no benefit whatsoever from being in those guilds were generating the guild master gold.
I remember a very, very legitimate way to make gold was to set up a successful like leveling guild or set up a successful like social guild that had 1,000 members in it, and you just sat there doing nothing, and then you just took all the income. Yeah. Yeah, you could get pretty rich that way. And then another thing that comes to mind in Warlords of Draenor, do you guys remember the follower activities you could do in Warlords on all of your alts every like couple hours? And there was a phone app you could do, the follower phone app. Do you guys remember that? You could literally make millions of gold just clicking on your phone in Warlords. Some people, I think I still have a couple million from that. So yeah.
I'm going to throw him under the bus here. At the time of Cataclysm, I was playing in a guild called Darkstorm before I joined Method at the latter half. Darkstorm had a member in it. Nice guy. Really lovely guy, actually, called Ulkashern. Ulkashern, hello. Ulkashern had 7 guilds across different realms called Ulkashern's Companions. I didn't know this at the time while I'm playing with the dude, and I went, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I need an hour to log through all the guilds, to kick all the people who haven't done anything this week, and then re-invite a whole bunch of fresh people who have literally either just installed the game or whatever using macros and things. Why? Ulkashern was the richest person I knew in World of Warcraft, and I knew a lot of the people who worked in the discords with money stuff. Ulkashern was generating millions upon millions of gold every week by just having every player. He had 3 guilds on our server. Ulkashern's Companions, Ulkashern's Companion, Ulkashern's Companion 2. Things like that, and he sucked up hundreds and hundreds of players. I didn't hate him for it, but I did hate that this caused Blizzard to abandon the system immediately.
Sheesh.
And now it became the norm. An entire expansion of this is actually devastating. I could tell a funny story about it, but it really did destroy what guilds were in the eyes of many players. Because a lot of people who had never played WoW, or were still sort of fledgling and finding their feet, they were just getting random guild invites via macros. And I'm sure you guys have experienced this too, and this became the norm.
That, yeah.
And when I talked about guilds in the videos I made following this, and I was like, you need to find a guild. What I should have said, and I regret this to this day, I really do, is that you need to find a guild with a purpose, a structure. Because so many millions of players, literally, were in guilds. And those guilds were just a secondary trade chat. They had no purpose, they had no structure, they had no organization.
So I've felt that way for a very long time on retail. I don't know if, I didn't know if that was just me, but like, and maybe it's partly because I'm a streamer. Like I usually don't log into WoW unless I'm live. And if I'm live, I'm reading Twitch chat. So I definitely have a different perspective than most players. But I feel like guild chat stopped feeling like guild chat like a very, very long time ago. The last guild I was in that really felt that way to me was Hey I'm MVP back in like Cata or like Mop. And that felt kind of cool. And then I felt like a slow kind of disintegration from there. Some people in the chat are agreeing. I'm actually, yeah, I don't know how many people feel this way. Do you guys feel this way as well? I don't know. It might just be because I stream now. I'm thinking more about it, to be completely honest. Sod guilds bring back that vibe. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else would have really done that. But I feel like in retail, it definitely has a different type of feel. I'll say that at least. It has a different type of feel. Even going up to someone in retail, just like walking up to someone and typing hi, has a different feel than Classic does. And it's hard to articulate exactly what it is. Like when you do that on Classic, you'll usually get a response. On retail, they'll probably fly away. You know what I mean? Like it's something feels a little different, like a little less social about it. People
tried to make things work in them, but they were cesspool guilds. They were literally in existence in order to provide money for one person who couldn't care less about whatever this guild did. It makes me sad because we got a lot of really nice features that Blizzard had to take away because poison. It had created poison. So, Ulkashern, screw you. The Cataclysm is now stabilized. Things are looking good. And now the biggest change to the game is coming. Not transmog. The LFR. What is it going to be? It's announced. Everybody will be able to queue for raids. Gotta remember, you might be used to it now. No, this is unheard of. That's not how raiding was done. It was an organized group. You were a big sir in a little pond and all that kind of stuff to raid, but now everybody was getting ready to raid. It was met negatively before it arrived. Why? Well, if you've seen our Legacy of Wrath of the Lich King, you'll know that for the good players, and I get that word could be offensive, but understand organized raiders, etc., They had no issue doing dungeons. And suddenly with LFD, they had been exposed to a side of the game they literally didn't know existed. They had no clue. And yes, I'm a part of that. I didn't know players were this bad. Genuinely. Right? That's not me trying to be offensive. It's just like, whoa, wait a minute. This guy doesn't even have like, this rogue has healer trinkets equipped? What is going on? Like, what is this? And it was what happened with LFD. So the prospect of LFR, these players now coming into raiding, was a little spooky. Little did we know then, as most
It's really a fascinating thing to consider. I have an interesting perspective because I wasn't always good at WoW. Like when I started WoW, I have some footage of it, super early days where I was clicking abilities. You know, I was moving with my arrow keys. You know, like I was noob, and I didn't know. Like I was young. I was 12. It was my first MMO. I didn't know where to find info. There was no YouTube videos out. Actually, YouTube didn't exist in 2004. Right? So there was like nothing, no like resources. And then as resources started coming out, Justin TV, Twitch TV, you know, started watching streamers. I was like, oh, whoa, I can really upgrade the way I see the game. And I did. And then I ended up getting a lot better. So I think it's a lot different now, right? Players have access to that. But back then, dude, before YouTube, before Twitch, if someone was a noob, dude, like they might have just been a noob. Like no one's gonna tell you you're wrong. You're you're out there doing everything wrong, and there's not like a ton of resources. Of course, there's forums and stuff back then, but even half the stuff you read on the forums, you're like, is this even true? Or like, you know, it wasn't as accessible. And then what are you gonna do? Spend your whole night reading? Like, no, I'm gonna hop in the game, get owned in a battleground. You know what I mean? Arena junkies existed, but still kind of the same thing. It's just really interesting time, you know, really interesting time.
Players hopefully know now is if you don't like LFR, don't do it. It's not for you anyway. But we didn't know that then. It was a new tier of raiding. Of course we're going to take part. Are we wrong for thinking that? No. You know why? Because they put some stupid goddamn tier bonuses in there that were absolutely mandatory to raid for, to the point that guilds got banned. We'll get there in a second. The LFR arrived, along with the Dragon Soul. This is it. This is the big finale. Deathwing. We're going to fight Deathwing. He destroyed the world. What an amazing experience this is definitely going to be. My first journey into LFR, I was okay with it actually. I got to raid and was just utterly baffled by how easy it was. Honestly, I was confused. As somebody who was a mechanics head who was literally at that point so frothing in my own juices at the fact that I was teaching people how to play World of Warcraft and all that, I found it ridiculous. I thought this is just the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And first of all, this is not raiding. Whatever this is might as well be a tennis ball or an inflatable ball rolling around and a bunch of toddlers running around trying to kick the damn thing. It was so ridiculous. But it is what it is, and I wanted those damn tier sets.
All right, I'm going to say something a bunch of people are going to disagree with. But I feel the exact same way about Solo Shuffle. I don't think it's arena at all. So let me provide some context. Arena at a high level to me is coordination. It's talking to your teammate and doing coordinated assaults, coordinated goes, rotating defensives properly, right? Solo Shuffle, of course, you play with a random player and you get into a match. There is no coordination. You can't coordinate an assault. So what does it become? Well, Solo Shuffle just becomes do a lot of damage and don't die, right? So to me, Solo Shuffle is not like the skill set of an arena player. It's more just like kind of like a skill set of a Mythic Plus player. Like, let's do a lot of damage and not die. That's one of the reasons I haven't been like super invested in Solo Shuffle over the past year or two. You know, after getting, I mean, we got rank 1 or whatever in all the brackets simultaneously. But I just feel like it's such a different thing. And I think LFR players, or sorry, Race to World First players doing like LFR probably maybe feel a bit similar. It's just completely different. Sorry if that makes you upset, but I do think there's a strong parallel there.
As did the big guilds. So what happened here? Well, if you look back through the history books, just before Heroic Week started, a lot of the top guilds suddenly got wiped out by Blizzard.
Uh-oh.
What were they doing? Well, the process was pretty simple. Blizzard had put in these 4 set bonuses that were raid-wide cooldowns, especially for the tanks. People found a way of guaranteeing they would drop. What you would do is bring the LFR boss down to very little health and then have everybody who you didn't want to get an item log out. And then the loot table would look at who killed the boss and go, oh, you're all druids. I should drop some leather tier set then, right? And not only that, the people who logged out never got saved. So they could go round and round and round. And if you're going to do this for the whole tanks, why don't we just do it for the whole raid? Right?
Oh,
yeah,
man,
well, they
I
did
never
do that.
knew
Yeah, they totally did that. And once other guilds found out that other guilds were doing it, they all did it and all jumped in it to abuse LFR gear, for Christ's sake. But it can't be underestimated just how powerful these set bonuses were. Let's talk about the actual raid itself. A mixed bag. Dragon Soul is a huge raid. It's absolutely enormous. There's a ton of bosses in there, and some of them are fantastic. Warmaster fighting across the bow of his ship. So good. Hagara, Ultraxion standing on the pinnacle of things, shooting giant orbs at you.
I remember
it was
this
a
fight.
really, really amazing raid with some really big downfalls, such as, well, Deathwing. Deathwing is awful in all ways. And it's really sad, because on paper, and I've said this a million times on my stream, I know, on paper, this fight sounds so good. And you can see that the boss developer's in a meeting and he's going, right, what we're going to do is we're going to have Deathwing, right? And he's flying across Azeroth and he's whooshing past us and all that kind of stuff. And the players are going to be on his back and they're going to have like spears and stuff and they're going to be like, die, Deathwing. And we're going to be like chopping his wings off and then we're going to force Deathwing to crash into the maelstrom and it's going to explode. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And then when you play it, you're running around with warts chasing you and standing in like little holes and then attacking a bit of his skin. But at least the second part would be better, right? Because guess what's going to happen then? So Deathwing, right? We've chopped his wings. He's crashed into the floor and he's like clinging on, right? He's like, I need to get out of the maelstrom. But then like all the dragon aspects are there and we're going to be there like, die, Deathwing, and trying to kick him off the edge. And we're like, no, dude, stamping on his face and all that. But then you play it and you're fighting an old bag lady's fingernails. And there's just this big dragon head sort of going
True.
in the background who doesn't really do anything. It was the worst. I've never been more disappointed in my life. And in fact, the whole Race to World First scene, which you know I'm a big fan of, was a shambles. Why? They introduced some really powerful gems to excite players with gearing. And basically, the Chinese guilds just moved everybody from different servers, buying all the gems from every auction house, and were massively overpowered and just killed the boss.
Oh my god.
And left to an entire level of confusion we'd never seen before. The Dragon Soul is an unfortunate set of circumstances where theory and hypothetical didn't really meet in practice. And I don't really blame the devs for this because the thought is there. As I described it, is how I'm sure the devs thought it was going to be. It just didn't turn out to be, and it was a rather limp ending to the Cataclysm, which had at this point, as you've seen, been a low, a high, and then kind of a low. Now, that wouldn't be too bad if that low
No, it was a long
didn't
time.
last for 11 months.
Yeah, 11 months.
Which it did. The unfortunate truth is, whatever was going on at Blizzard at the time that caused them to rush out Cataclysm also meant that they would already be working on Mists of Pandaria, and they were responding to what happened in Cataclysm with the change of dungeons and how people responded to difficulty and all those kinds of things. And it took 11 months of zero content. And again, another massive sub-drop on Blizzard's part. What is the legacy of the Cataclysm then? It's tough. This was the first time the ground shook, literally. Deathwing may have cracked Azeroth, but at the same time, Blizzard showed cracks. It was rushed. There's something so inherently wrong with how Cataclysm launched. The problems we faced in the raiding scene and the dungeons should not have been a thing. As much as I don't hate Blizzard for trying to raise the caliber of the dungeons, they should have seen that it needed to be gradual. And Blizzard has never been known for baby steps to try and correct its misplays. There's no excuse for it. They rushed it out, and they must have felt internally absolutely unstoppable. And that snowball hit a wall in Cataclysm. People were saying, no, you know what? I don't need this. Yes, it's a phenomenal game, but it's not for me anymore. And those sub-numbers started to drop and would continue to drop forevermore until we're never going to get back to Wrath of the Lich King numbers. But again, Blizzard did amazing things. As frustrated and bitter as a lot of my start of Cataclysm was, that mid-game, transmog, reforging, Firelands. All that was peak
Sounds
game.
like Preach, like
the zones
Reforging
were
too.
phenomenal. They were trying new things, creative things that they probably would never do again. Bashir, I talked about it earlier, but it's so good. It's amazing. And I really hope that when Kata comes back out in Kata Classic, that you guys give it a fair shot again. And maybe you'll come back and say, nope, still hate it. And
Mount
that's
Hyshal,
fine.
baby.
That's all. The legacy of the Cataclysm is Blizzard being shaken themselves. They needed to do something. But I have to say this. I played it every single day since it launched until it turned into the next expansion, and I loved it. I had a great time.
Yeah.
I was deeply upset. I was angry at Blizzard for what they did to raiding, but I moved on. I got going, and they started to fix their issues, and they sort of like kicked into a higher gear. Dragon Soul
Fair enough.
lasted too long, right? 12 months of no content is never good. But they'd also learnt their lessons from Cataclysm of not rushing out content. Blizzard is still learning. They're still fledgling. They're still trying to get things correct, and I don't blame them for that. I loved Cataclysm. At the same time, guys, I hated Cataclysm. And I hated a lot of things it did.
Well, like, if you look back at some of the best gaming experiences we've had, all of them have pros and cons. It would be like just looking through rose-tinted glasses to think that there was nothing wrong at that time. Like, Modern Warfare 2 was a great Call of Duty. But if you look back and you really start to, like, metagame and min-max it, it was super broken and annoying and actually kind of crappy, too. But it was really fun. And that's the way I do feel about Cataclysm. Like, there was a lot that was completely broken. And I say this more from the PvP perspective, but, you know, there's a lot that was really broken. Like, Cunning of the Cruel. Are you kidding me? You know, the Rogue Trinket of Vial of the Sands. Like, are you kidding me? Vial of Shadow? Vial of Shadow. Gotta be Vial of Shadow. You know, other stuff like that, like Legendary Daggers, Legendary Staff, RLS, LUL, right? Like, there was just so much. But it was still so fun, and it gripped me start to finish, even though like the end was a bit long, even from a PvP perspective. And then same thing with MOP, you know. So you look back and it's like, okay, yeah, there was a lot that was wrong, but like it was still fun at the time, man. I really did enjoy it. And anyway, that's what I'm so nostalgic for it, so I can't wait.
Well, that's the legacy of these expansions, and that's how it works. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in seeing more from me and the team, please check out our website or drop into the live stream. And if you're interested in picking up some memorabilia, remember, why don't you check out a display? Some of the best artwork from our in-house artists and also from Blizzard themselves that you might want to take a look at. We have a big discount coming, so pay attention for that. Bye, guys.
Great video. I like that it offers that other side, that PvP side that I didn't get. What is this? Music video? Poggers. I like that it gives me that other side of things that I didn't really like quite know. I didn't know the start of Cataclysm raids were like that broken. Did you guys know that? I had no idea. No clue. Great video. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Little cat sham in the chat. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Nice way to end a vid, man. Just 3 minutes of a music video. Love it. Absolutely love it. I heard about the LFR loot exploit. I didn't know about that either. All I remember is that in Arena, I had to get certain trinkets if you wanted to not get completely smoked. So I had to do LFR every single week. And then I eventually got the trinkets, but it still wasn't nearly as good as the people that had the heroic trinkets. So it was still frustrating. And it like all throughout Cata, I was like, dude, I just don't have the gear that I want because I need to do the raids. So yeah, I remember being frustrated. Like that, my biggest frustration of Cataclysm as a 16-year-old playing arenas was I had to do so much of the PvE content that I didn't feel like I wanted to do. So I just queued up LFR to get it done easy, but the LFR groups would then like rage and wipe, and then I finally would get it done, and then it wouldn't drop. So I had to do the same thing for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in a row. And then I finally got it, and it still wasn't as good as the normal heroic, so it just had me like banging my head against the desk like, I want to queue arenas, man. What are we doing here? Farming a damn Cunning of the Cruel for the past 15 weeks, and it still sucks, and like, yeah, I'm out here like 1 win away from Gladiator, trying to just squeeze every little bit of, yeah. Anyway, that's my experience with Cata.